Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Harris, and I am your host for Maximize Excellence. And I'm very excited today to be hosting a guest, Katie Schlipp, who is the president of laboratory operations for Alcami Corporation. And a little bit about Katie before we dive into our dialogue and start with all of our questions. We've got a few out on looks like on LinkedIn, and they're already commenting. So we've got Lynn Whitesell on the back end, and she's going to be managing those conversations for us today. And she will let me know, Katie, if there's any questions that pop up that we'll be able to also bring to the table for this dialogue. But Katie, again, president of laboratory operations at Alcami. She is a business and technical leader with more than 28 years of progressive experience in pharmaceutical product development. She oversees the analytical and support operations for a high-growth contract development and manufacturing organization, so CDMO company, and she is focused on strategic process improvements that drive growth and efficiencies. She is an accomplished leader dedicated to, I love this, coaching, mentoring, and developing high potential employees. And you're going to see in this dialogue where I'm going to speak to that a little bit, and she's going to tell some stories around that. And she has an enormous trust with her team and with her staff. It's beautiful. I've seen it in work in progress, and it's just beautiful to watch. Katie also holds a master's degree in chemistry from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. Woohoo, go Seahawks. Woo! So welcome, everybody. Welcome, Katie. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Lori. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone today. So thanks again for the invite.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about maximizing career progression. And so when Lynn and I decided on what we were going to do for this podcast, you immediately came to mind because Lynn's known you for quite some time. And I believe that's part of your story. But can you share with our audience your career journey from starting as an intern all the way to becoming like president of laboratory operations at Alcami, and what got you to where you are today?
Sure, absolutely. So Alcami, it was actually formerly known as AAI. It was my first job within my field. So I started as a senior in college, and how I went essentially from a part-time, essentially an intern to president, it really was many different factors. So I do have this natural drive and determination. I have this constant sense that I can do more and that I can always be better. And so this really pushes me to be better every day. I'm really not trying to be better than anyone around me, or I'm not trying to make comparisons with anyone. It truly is this competition internally with myself and how I can be my best self so that I can, and make maybe a positive impact on others. And just this relentless pursuit to succeed for the team, for the company. So really that's a factor. I would say my attitude, I'm an eternal optimist. I will always see things glass half full. My first words whenever things go off the rails is, we're going to get through this. There's always a way out of this. I know that we'll find a solution. And I'm driven by the challenge of finding solutions. Another factor is going to be my technical skills. So I love learning and I love solving problems. And so always being very curious about the whys, really understanding why I'm doing what I do. And I guess my drive really helped in my favor here too. So whenever anybody labels you, for example, I had a customer who labeled me as technically strong. So they went to my boss after a meeting and said, Katie is technically strong. And so someone labeling me as technically strong, I immediately felt this strong accountability to make sure that I was that person for every client that came through the door. And so that certainly drove me to success. But I think maybe the biggest part really that I wanted to comment around what got me to where I am is maybe the great examples and the mentors that I've had around me. So you're really as good as the people that surround you. And I have been surrounded by some incredible people. I mean, really top-notch folks. I've been motivated, inspired by the best of the best from my bosses, from the colleagues I work with, and especially from an incredible team. One example that I had was a previous boss. I had this boss for about 17 years. His name was Dr. Dean Shirazi. Boy, I learned a ton from him technically, and I was really, really challenged. He had very high expectations. But what I learned, I guess the greatest lesson from him is how he treated his team. There was always a line outside of his door. He was on conference calls, protocols, reports, quotes, everything was in front of him. But yet he would still welcome us whenever we entered his door. Come in, come in. And we really had this safe space to learn and had the confidence to go in with a question. And so to this day, I really try to greet everyone that comes through my door with that same energy and the same excitement and eagerness. And I think the last thing to say maybe around this topic is I was given a chance to be where I am today. So you gradually learn and grow in your roles, but going into an executive role really took someone, the guts to say, I'm going to take a chance on Katie. And that was my former CEO, Pat Walsh. He recognized the determination and the drive in me. He put a goal in front of me, and he empowered me to build a team and to build the business. And really under his leadership is where I think I grew the most. So really, those are sort of the factors I would say that got me to where I am today.
Yeah, and career progression is it is a structured strategy internally in organizations. And a lot of times, especially when you're younger, you don't really realize that you're in it or you're going through it. And so organizations and leaders, especially that are intentional about setting up a structured advancement for individual career paths and being able to create a motivating and supportive environment where there's movement and mobility in that role, and where there's that increased responsibility and complexity in that role that aligns with a lot of your skill sets or your desires in competency building and skills building, and where you're also aligned to company philosophy, mission, vision, values, as well as those organizational goals. And I love initially when you responded, because you talked specifically about self-directed career management. And that is a big part of career progression as well. You talked about that desire and that drive. Absolutely. And where you were taking personal responsibility in your own development and career choices, and allowing those relationships to really, those especially nurturing relationships, to really give you those opportunities and those pathways, and continuing to keep those strong in that process as well, so that you could promote and you could experience these areas where you've created tremendous value. So I love that you spoke to that in a very personal way, and it does apply very specifically to career progression. So talk to us and share with the audience about some of your most valuable lessons that you've learned throughout your career.
There have been many.
Yeah. And with humor, right?
there have been many. There have been some really tough lessons. But going back to being an optimist, yes. I took them as an opportunity in each sort. I also see it as a season of time. So the lessons, be them great lessons, tough lessons, but they're seasons in your life that you seize that opportunity to take it as a lesson. But I think the greatest lesson for me, especially in career progression, is the being comfortable with uncomfortable, being comfortable in the midst of ambiguity. When I was in the lab, I knew the ins and outs and the details of what I needed to do every single day. I was empowered because I had SOPs, the black and white of things. But when you go into leadership, it's not black and white. So you can't really know every tree to understand the forest. You have to be uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable with ambiguity, and you have to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. Um, Obviously, it's never a favored path. No one wants to go into the uncomfortable, but honestly, in my career, I've actually learned to seek out the opportunities to be uncomfortable. It's certainly where I'm most challenged. It's where I will learn the most. It's where I'm stretched, and it's where I grow. Early in my career, I was very uncomfortable to speak to clients or to tour clients, to even think about leading people or making critical decisions that impact the company or a program, speaking with regulatory authorities, speaking publicly, really a lot of situations that I had to put myself into that uncomfortable spot so that I could grow and become more comfortable in those situations. And actually doing that, it helped me discover the things that I really enjoy doing most today. So I say my greatest lesson is embrace being uncomfortable, because that's where you will grow.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And in those areas of developing competency, and did you use things like a career path lattice model, or did the organization give you that support as you began to identify with these opportunities that were brought to you from your leaders? Were they using any tools specifically to help you with your development growth?
They absolutely did.
Yeah.
And so working with leaders kind of in the technical space, there's so many things to learn. You'll never know everything in the space that we're in. You have the opportunity to be in the lab, to be in project management, to be in manufacturing and quality. So anywhere you raise your hand, to learn something new, I feel like that was given to me as an opportunity. One big opportunity from my career with Alcami was raising my hand for opportunities for furthering my education. So I was able to go back, get a master's in analytical chemistry, which benefited me, and also benefited the company as I worked on some research that was, within internal interest. So there was always a lot of opportunity to set a path on what I needed to do to grow into the next stage.
Yeah, and so a lot of that sounds very technical. What about the leadership side of this, the behavioral side of this, that really helped you become a more effective and more efficient leader?
There were definitely folks that came in. So we did have consultants that come in. We had a strong training program that would do the ins and outs of, I would say, management, how to be more effective leader, how to speak in some really uncomfortable conversations, performance management, things like that. So the
Right.
company certainly did invest in that.
Yeah, definitely. And so I'm curious, how do you approach leadership, especially in this highly technical field where you're working with PhDs, with top scientists, with top chemists? How do you approach leadership?
Oh, yeah. So technical credibility is essential. So it
Yeah,
will make or break you. The
yeah.
foundation of your brand is based on your technical credibility. So the foundation that I had, so I was at the bench for 15 years and had hands-on experience. I think having walked the walk, I'm a far more effective leader today just because I have a great understanding of my team's day to day. So what their challenges are, the timing of work, ways of working. I really know all the processes firsthand, and I essentially speak their language. And so I think this knowledge is powerful. And in using this, I'm able to make some pretty informed decisions, so that I get respect and trust really from my team, because they know that I understand the complexities of their work. Um, I have also recognized that I'm no longer the SME, like I once was. So things certainly evolve after being out of the lab for 15 years. So I empower the team. So I leverage their expertise. I lean into them. I have found this approach that it really helps others get, out of their comfort zone and to help them grow to their potential. And this really builds their confidence and helps them realize the value of their contributions. And then leadership by example, certainly, I will never ask anyone to do more than what I wouldn't do myself. I put in the hard work. I set and strive for goals. I get in the uncomfortable, and really I do what I commit to. So I think that is the approach to leadership, especially within this technical field.
Very admirable and remarkable in that sense. It absolutely sets a tone for what we call cultural leadership as well. Yeah, definitely love that.
Absolutely.
What would you tell aspiring top talent that's young, really seeking to climb the ladder and wanting that leadership role? What advice would you give to them, given leadership? It's
funny because I give the same advice that I do myself. If I, it's work hard, understand your craft. I mean, and maybe it's even transitioning maybe into the leadership roles. And maybe I could start there. It's with 15 years of my experience, it's like, learn what your craft is.
Yes.
Learn all the ins and outs and the details. Have that credibility in your technical skills. One of the hardest things that anyone, in my opinion, will do, I think it doesn't come natural, especially in the technical space, is how you transition from being that individual contributor into a more performance management space. So for years and years, my success was really evaluated based on my own performance, what I did with my own hands, what I had control of.
Right.
And so when I became a people manager, my success was no longer solely based on my performance. It was now a representation of the team's performance, what I no longer had control over. And so this weight was pretty significant considering my drive to succeed. And so I worked nonstop. I worked 12 hours a day, 12 plus hours a day, weekends. I was trying to carry the performance of others on my own back. And I really wanted everyone at the level that I held myself to. And so for about a year, when I moved into management, I asked myself, what have I gotten myself into? Because what I was doing was simply not sustainable. But then finally, I stepped back and I found the groove of performance management. And I did that by setting clear expectations, what needed to get done. I found the art of communicating effectively with in different ways and different styles. I learned the art of giving the whys and the importance of the programs. And so when I started partnering with my team, and then really just checking in with them routinely, my job began more in removing barriers. And so I provided course correction and accountability, but really when I empowered the team and just let go and trusted them, that's when I found the sweet spot of leadership. So I guess my advice would be your success going from an individual contributor into leadership, your success is no longer from your own hands. You cannot do what you did before to be successful. You really have to find a new stride. Within your team, make sure you understand their weaknesses and their strengths, and then apply the strengths that make an impact, and then you build their weaknesses. And then the biggest thing is empower them. If you've taught them well and trained them well, then you have to trust and empower them to do what you've set them to do.
Excellent. So what strategies have you found effective for fostering a culture of excellence and continuous improvement with your team?
So I think the most effective way to develop culture of excellence and a mindset of continuous improvement is really just have those high standards and certainly communicating a vision. So when the team knows the vision, when they see the impact of their work, when they see that what excellence looks like in practice, I think they're more likely to be motivated to achieve excellence. But there needs to be this balance of what your high standards are, and empowerment, and really create this environment that supports the growth and the innovation and the innovation. So in our lab, our mantra is always be better. So we're on this continuous journey of improvement, and we are never done. It will always be there. And that's something that we've set, as a culture. So excellence is really a shared commitment. And really my strategy is to set the vision, to hold ourselves to that higher standard, to empower and to support the team for operational excellence initiatives. We really need to measure ourselves and make sure that we're on track with regards to what we're trying to accomplish. And then when you have those wins, you really need to recognize them, celebrate them, and then reward the team where they're making that great impact.
So I want to take you back a little bit to performance management in that leadership space again. How do you balance technical expertise with business acumen when making strategic decisions?
Sure. So I think you really have to know and understand what your business goals are. So that's the first thing. So no matter where you sit, your corporate goals have to, I guess your individual goals on up to management, to next level management, on up to ELT and corporate goals, they have to be built on each other.
Yeah.
So really, I first need to understand what our business goals are and what those overarching objectives are. So what your growth targets are, what are your client needs, what is the competitive positioning that you want to be in. So I also seek feedback from technical teams. So I'll reach out to them to understand what clients are asking for, what they're hearing about from the industry. I talk to the business team, so certainly they're in front of the clients every day. They actually see what the requests are from customers. And so I get the feedback from them. And then I'll leverage any of that data and metrics where we're measuring ourselves, where we need improvements. So that's going to be considered and assessed. I consider cost. What could be the return on investment whenever we're thinking about certain initiatives? Is there any risk reduction? Is there competitive advantage if we went forward with some type of strategic decision? But really, ultimately, I think by staying focused on that business goal, using data-driven information to help with some of the decision making, fostering that open communication along, the verticals, as well as the horizontals. We're able to make decisions really based on, my technical expertise, but it's heavily weighted on how that impacts the business.
And I would probably also add, and you're very humble and not mentioning it, but your leadership competencies are incredible. They're remarkable, Katie.
Oh, thank you very much for
Again,
saying that.
I've witnessed it with you and your teams. It was some of the stuff we've done together in the past couple months, and quite impressive. And they have a high respect for you. It's beautiful to watch. And so I'm curious, are you implementing things like career pathing and competency frameworks and career development plans, or even leadership development plans, maybe even 360s and various types of assessments as well within the organization and with your individuals on your team, so that they better understand themselves, they better understand each other? You're also nurturing that culture of excellence that you talked about with those standards. So are you using some of those models and tools in your day-to-day leadership practice as well with your teams?
Absolutely. It evolves. So we are far better now today than we were even, yesterday.
Right.
And it goes back into that approach of always be better. So we recognized, and so I can give you an example that we just went through. So titling, folks' titles. It's very important to individuals to feel appropriately titled, and then also to be at the level at which they're working. And we did not have a very clear career progression matrix in place in
Mm-hmm.
order for the team to understand, how do I get to where I want to be,
Yeah.
or how do I get to the next level? And so we developed, along with many other folks in the group, a career progression matrix. And it gives the team, they all have access to it. It gives the team very clear ways, or even a map of what it takes for me to advance my career into the advance to the next level. But more than that, I think the approach is within the lab. So a lot of times folks start in technically to get experience, but their intent is never to stay in the lab. I have a great love for the lab. It's why I never left. But others really have aspirations, is I want my foundation based on analytical chemistry, but I really want to be more client facing. Or I really have a strong desire to be in a quality space. So while they get the foundation of coming into the lab, we really like to, have one-on-ones with our team to understand is what's next for you. What are your aspirations? What do you really want to do with your career? Maybe not next year, maybe it's in a couple of years, but how can we help you get to that next level, so that we're developing you in a way that kind of sets you on the path to get you where you want to go. And so while I hate, folks leave the lab, because I really, really enjoy building a great team with some fantastic people, I love the fact that they choose to stay with our company, with Alcami, because there's so many different opportunities for them, not just in the lab. And so career progression certainly is formalized, and we've done a lot of great work to formalize it. But there is a lot of soft skills that are involved with it as well, to ensure that they feel supported and that
Mm-hmm.
they're being developed.
Excellent. And this type of retention strategy, as we know, absolutely fuels organizational effectiveness, which absolutely gives and provides sustainability, profitability, those wonderful things that we're always seeking in business. And it gives individuals just this motivation to get up and go to work every day and have fun, enjoy their
Yes,
job, really like the people
absolutely.
they're with. Yeah, so this is why Lynn and I love Alchemy so much. You guys have such a great structure for that culture and that teaming that's needed in the organization. So
Absolutely.
I want you to discuss a time when you faced a significant challenge in your career and how you overcame it. And this is like the typical interview question, right? When you get the job.
It really is.
But yeah, it is. I giggle because it is. Uh, However, I would love our audience to hear about something in your career that was a significant challenge, and not just where you were uncomfortable, but truly a big strategic challenge, and how you really overcame that.
Sure. I did have a time in my career that challenged me to the very ends. It was very, very difficult. And it was many years ago. I once reported to a boss that expected me to take a very negative and aggressive approach with people. They wanted to drive results through like a bulldog style approach, manage with a stick, intense, demanding, even belittling. And this just was not my style. It was completely against my grain. And as an empathetic leader who manages with a very servant style leadership, I had to make the decision to stay true to who I was. And so during this time, I really do think it was a divine plan that opened a door for me that changed the trajectory of my career. It put me in executive leadership. So while I made the very tough call to stay true to who I am, knowing that it would change the course of where I would be, it absolutely worked to my benefit. Even though I went through this very difficult, experience, and I
Right.
call it a season in my career,
Right.
I wouldn't take it back for anything because I am absolutely far better for it.
Mhm.
What I know from this experience is that leadership through empathy and respect, through encouragement, through empowerment, it will build a far better team. You can lead with positivity and still hold others accountable. You can be respectful and you can still have honest and direct conversations about
Yes.
performance.
Yes. We say all the time, there absolutely, when you commit to 100% responsibility and you encourage that with others, and it's more than accountability, it now becomes this very self-motivating energy that we've got, and it drives impeccable agreements. It drives bringing your best to work each day. It's amazing to see the productivity and the engagement levels when in fact that type of environment is in existence, and it does start with leadership. So bravo. I love that
Thank you, Lori.
story. I do. I love that story. What advice would you give someone aspiring to transition from a technical role and into like these others? We tapped on it a little bit, but I want you to deep dive that, because you probably deal with that when you're sitting in these one-on-ones, when you're talking about career advancement and mobility.
I think it goes along the same thing that we had just mentioned before. Um, Understanding that it's no longer your hands that
Yeah.
create the success of the team or create the success of the group. Be kind to yourself.
Mhm.
I think it's know where your limits are, and
Mhm.
then go seek out for support and help within your team, within the great leaders around you. Get really, really close to folks who are really good at leadership.
Uh-huh.
Learn from what they've already learned. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Use the tools that they've created. And then back to it, it's I would say just be super kind to yourself, and that it's not built, leadership isn't built immediately. It takes years to perfect. Um, Team is probably the number one thing that I put on my priorities. So the success of what others do as a leader, I feel like I am far more um, proud of what my team has done more than anything that I've ever accomplished. And so, what you invest in others at the end of your career is really what your legacy is. And so, that's my advice: is never neglect the folks that report to you.
Mm. And we always say the number one asset of any organization are its
It's your
people.
people.
And
Absolutely.
people strategies do matter greatly in the organization. So, in keeping it real, I'm curious how much of your career progression, so we won't even call it success, we'll just say your career progression, which was successful, by the way, and because of that you're able to be available and lead others and teach, this thought leadership. But how much of it was encouraged self-directed learning, or even how much of it was mentorship, advisorship, or sponsorship, so to say? And how did that truly impact those seasons that you talked about? But I'm curious, was there just this deep desire for you, and that really was the majority of where you really saw your progression? Or was it because of some of the, you mentioned mentorship earlier, but I'm wondering, did you have advisors or did you have a coach? I'm curious about the other roles.
I did not have advisors or a coach, like, formally.
Uh-huh.
But we talked a little bit about what got me to where I am today. It is absolutely who I surrounded myself with.
Yeah.
When I started my career, going into the lab, so certainly you've got many, many people who are in the lab. And so how do you stand out as a future leader, as a high potential? I would say whenever I connected with someone who was excellent, exceptional, the best of the best, I really wanted to set my chair right beside them and learn everything I could from them. And so early in my career, I was partnered with a great friend. Her name's Tara Garner. But she taught me the art of organization. She taught me the art of writing up an incredible write-up, doing things right the first time, doing things efficient, being very, very professional. So as a young person just coming into the industry, having that example really made my way, because I saw what great looked like right out of the gate. And so my aspirations was always to do better, because I surrounded myself with people that motivated me to do better. I think that was the greatest thing. So it's probably a little bit of both, where I just have this insatiable drive that I put on myself to be the best I can be. But the way that I do that is through others, because they're the ones who give me the example of what great looks like.
Love it. I absolutely love it. And what would you recommend for some of these emerging leaders? What would you recommend for development for them at this time?
So there's a couple of ways to go into leadership. Being a subject matter expert, because you can lead without leading people. Being a subject matter expert, knowing your craft, and being the best that you can be in that. Your competitors are on the outside, so folks that we compete with in the industry. So certainly having the best service that's out there that could be offered. And so that's one way. Then you have the path of leadership. It is read lots of books. I think I learned a great deal from books. I went to several different conferences about leadership that was sponsored by Alcami, that kind of introduced me to the value of those books, where we would use the information presented to have case studies and work through some of that. So invest in yourself, and really take the skills that you've learned, through your craft. So if you were in the lab, just like I was for 15 years, you have built on your technical credibility, and now you are establishing your ability to lead people and to be a positive influencer.
What are your top 3 books? What are your top 3 favorite books? I'm curious.
I've got several good books, and it's funny because I'll read books and I will maybe get 1 or 2 things out of each book. This is a really oldie but goodie, and it's funny because I went to a school the other day and they had them listed on the columns of the school, but it's Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and the reason is it really summarizes being great at leadership, or being great as a subject matter expert, just being great at your craft. But some of those habits are, be proactive. So get up and go do something. Begin with the end in mind. It means know what your goals are and then go for them. Put first things first. So be good at prioritizing. Think win-win. You have to make sure that, everybody in the scheme of it has some type of positive output from whatever the solution is in the end. Seek first to understand. It's one of my favorite ones. It's seek first to understand, then be understood. It's really be a good listener. Really just, I think you communicate far better when you're a great listener. Synergizing. So getting, people together as a team, you will get far more results out of a team than you would from an individual person. And then we spoke about this a few minutes ago. It's called the habit of sharpening the saw, and it means really, invest in yourself and invest in the development of yourself. So that's one great book. I have several, but another good book was called Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni.
Yes.
this really talks about the vulnerability of putting your ideas out, not being afraid to share your ideas and getting your voice in the room. So that was really empowering. So as an analyst coming from the lab and getting in the room with people who are far smarter than I was, but just voicing what your opinions were. And so that book really had an impact on me. But I think my favorite book, and it's this tiny little book by Ogmandino, and it's called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And this really draws into sort of my personality. I came across this book. It was total by chance. But when I opened the first page, it said, "I will persist until I succeed. I was not delivered unto this world in defeat, nor does failure course through my veins. Failure will never overtake me if my determination to succeed is strong enough." And this book really kind of teaches readers about, that rejection is normal, that people that have strong minds to develop skills will overcome failure. People who aren't afraid to persist, they usually are the ones that win. It talks about the uniqueness of people and how that uniqueness is valuable. I love this one, how work is your friend, it's not your enemy, and that obstacles are absolutely necessary for success.
These are powerful, profound, and they are absolutely great foundations to launch a career path from, and realize that progression and have those challenges that are just situations and circumstances that can be managed and they can be handled, and outcomes can be very, very positive and joyful. So we can actually have joy at work each and every day in ways. Yeah. And those challenges now become something that, oh gosh, you know what? We can actually handle that, or I can absolutely manage that. And so it's not so much as a catastrophic situation. And so I'm going to leave it on this. What's the one takeaway, the one thought leadership that you want to share out there with the audience? And by doing so, I want you to also not just give the motivator that you're going to leave us with, but give us the context in which that comes from.
I think the biggest thing is enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
You are far more motivated when you love what you do. So really embrace the mission. Work hard. Do not be afraid to put in the effort. Whenever you love what you do, it no longer is work. So hone your skills. Really become the expert in that piece. Be loyal to your team and cheer for your teammates. I think that if you've got a company around you that are working for each other rather than against each other, it's far more powerful and will take you far greater places than you can imagine. So loyalty to your team and to your colleagues is really critical. And then believe in yourself. You have the potential far greater than what you think. And so really, really stretch yourself and go for the big goals, not just what you see in front of you.
Katie, I can't thank you enough for your wisdom today, for your courage, for your humility, deep humility, and for expressing your discipline in the way in which you go about your career and your relationships and your purpose. And lastly, I just want to say thank you for bringing joy to our podcast today by sharing your story, by talking about what matters most to you, and also by believing in those that you've yet to meet. How's that?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lori, for having me. It's
Absolutely.
been a real pleasure talking about this. So thank you so much.
I love it. And thank you everyone today for joining us for another episode of Maximizing Excellence. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Maximize Excellence. Visit our events page on our website for details on upcoming podcasts and visit our YouTube channel to listen to past episodes. And remember to ask yourself at the end of each day, did I do my best to maximize excellence today?